Bro, X-ray specs for $1.50? That's wild. Oh, what's up? Just checking out this old issue of Tarzan Lord of the Jungle from 1979. You know, classic read. But that's not what you're here for. I know what you're here for. Because it's Geekborn, and you're back for the 6th episode in the Barely Relevant series. Where, you know, similar to the game, The 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, where you connect a film through the actors, we connect each movie or TV show that we review through the actors. See, now this movie right here is a movie that I have not revisited in years. Along with Spider-Man 2, it helped to change how people looked at superhero films, pretty much in general. Even with the campiness that it's got, these films can be done well, and this one showed that it could be done well and bring big bucks to the box office. So we followed the iconic actor JK Simmons, Tenzin, son of the Avatar Aang from the Legend of Korra, to his iconic role as J Jonah Jameson in Spider-Man. You know, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man from 2002. So let's take a look at this fun but campy film. So, back in the day, we're doing opening credits for movies. They could feel like they were super important back in the day. They just go on and on forever, not like we have today, where we just get straight into the movie. But the visuals are pretty interesting for this. Rewatching it, you actually get to see the movie through the introduction. We start with the narration from Peter, and then we get this over-the-top introduction of him. We see how nerdy he is, to the point that the nerds think he's too nerdy to sit with him on the bus. The students won't let him sit with him at all. And, of course, all the students are supposed to be seniors, but it looks like they all got held back, and the dude that's supposed to be their teacher looks like he was their classmate that went off to college while they all got held back and then came back to be their teacher. I think it's hilarious because they all pretty much just look the same age. We do get to meet Peter's only friend, who's Harry Osborn, the son of Norman Osborn. He's a rich kid, and honestly, he should probably be like the most popular kid in school. But, he's friends with the guy that the nerds think's too nerdy to hang out with. So I guess that just kind of goes to show to see how this works. Harry's father, Norman, as I said, he's a bit of a scientist himself.
I'm something of a scientist myself.
But Harry doesn't seem to be super into that whole situation. I mean, he seems to like the money and whatnot, but he doesn't seem to be into what his dad's into. We get a long scene in the science field trip, which is basically dedicated to leading Peter to getting bit. Spider slowly creeps down onto Peter's hand. At the same time, Peter is creeping, taking a whole bunch of pictures of Mary Jane, consensual pictures of Mary Jane, mind you, but he told her they're for the newspaper and they're probably for himself. We cut to Norman at his research lab, and we find out that the military is funding the glider tech and the human enhancement drugs that he is working on, but they're thinking about cutting the funding because he doesn't seem to be getting a whole lot of research furthering these advancements. The scrawny Peter Parker makes it back home, passes out on the floor, the spider bite looking so nasty, looking ugly on his hand, and we see the new DNA starting to graft to him. At the same time, Norman decides that he needs to try these drugs on himself that he's been working on. We get this nasty looking hot box where his whole chamber fills up with smoke. It's supposed to be the drug, I guess, in a vaporized form. Then he goes on a rampage. We see him attack the doctor. We don't really see a whole lot what happens. But then we see Peter wake up. He doesn't need his glasses anymore, and he's ripped.
Any better this morning? Any change?
Change? Yeah. Big change.
He tries practicing talking to Mary Jane as he's walking to the bus stop, and he sees her, but as he goes to talk to her, she gets picked up by her friend, and of course the bus just whizzes past him and he misses the bus again. It turns out Norman killed that dude that he attacked, and he stole the glider and the flight suit that they were working on. But he doesn't seem to remember any of it. It's a bit of a situation going on neurologically. And apparently, there's no cameras in the lab. You'd think there'd be cameras to like check on the dude or see what's going on or whatever. Seems like Peter made it to school though, even though the bus passed him. And this is where we see him catch Mary Jane, and then Toby catches the food on the tray. Tobey Maguire actually did that. Took 156 takes to get it right. Peter accidentally webs a tray of food and flings it at Flash on accident, behind him. There's a whole scene, the fight scene after that.
I don't want to fight you, Flash.
I wouldn't want to fight me neither. Kick his ass, man.
Some great music as Peter goes through and leaves school, learns about his powers. Then the hilarious scene where he's on the rooftop trying to figure out how to get his webs to go out. He's go web go and all that fun stuff. He forgot he was supposed to be at home helping paint the kitchen. He's going through all these weird changes and got a whole lot going on. He's worried about the girl because he gets home and he hears much yelling over at Mary Jane's house. MJ comes out. MJ and Peter have a little talk until Flash picks her up in his new car. So Pete decides he needs a car to impress MJ. So he sees an amateur wrestling, and it pays $3,000 for 3 minutes in the ring. So he designs a costume. He goes through. He decides he's going to go. Uncle Ben decides to take him. Uncle Ben has his talk with Peter, even though Peter doesn't even really want to be there because he's worried about making this money. But with great power comes great responsibility.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Randy Savage as the Titan of Testosterone, Bonesaw. Bonesaw is ready! Then we get Bruce Campbell, has his interaction because he's the announcer at the wrestling match, and Spider-Man, Peter Parker's like, hey, I'm the human spider, and Bruce Campbell's like, that's some bullshit. It's like, it's the Spider-Man, and the Amazing Spider-Man! That's about 39 minutes into the movie, we get that. So 40 minutes in, we get to hear Spider-Man's name for the first time. Then they give this dude a freaking chair. They give Bonesaw, the big hulking dude, a chair against this like average-sized dude in a spider costume. Then they give him a crowbar to beat the shit out of Spider-Man, but that leads to some nonsense. He doesn't actually get any hits on him, and he knocks Bonesaw out. But the dude shafts Peter because he didn't spend the whole 3 minutes in the ring. But immediately after that happens, the dude gets robbed, and Peter lets the guy go. I forgot where that's my problem. Peter shows up just in time to see that Uncle Ben is dead, passes away, and then hears the suspects are going, so he chases after him. We see Peter swing through the city for the first time, and 20 years later, this still looks pretty good. There's some CGI that doesn't completely hold up in some scenes here and there. And of course, the one scene later where the Green Goblin is at. But seeing him fly through the city is awesome. Peter goes through, he confronts the guy in the abandoned building. There's a bit of a fight between the two, but he ends up startling the guy, and the guy falls out of a window to his death. Norman makes his first appearance as the Green Goblin in a pretty quick appearance. He destroys the other competition in this other company that's working on some competitive tech. He just blows them the hell up and then flies away. Then, inspired by the talk that Peter has with his uncle, Peter makes his final spider suit to become Spider-Man and start protecting people. We get a scene, J Jonah Jameson finding out the newspaper, but he wants pictures of Spider-Man. We're talking about how Spider-Man's a menace. They make a reference to Eddie, who's been trying to get pictures of Spider-Man for weeks apparently, but we don't really get to see him. He does show up later in the trilogy, because Peter also mentions at one point being late to work at Dr. Connor's office. But Dr. Connors shows up in the second movie. Don't think he really worked at Dr. Connor's office before going to college and all that stuff, but who knows. I think they're just kind of adding things to the dialogue that some fans might catch that might not exactly work when some of these characters show up in some of the later films. We get Peter finally goes through. He sees the headline for the Daily Bugle that they need pictures of Spider-Man and decides he's just going to start taking pictures of himself. You know, he's out crime fighting, being Spider-Man, and he's already taking pictures, so he'll set up a camera on a timer and take some pictures. The board plans to sell Norman's company out from underneath of him. It's crazy. They're going to do it after this big festival. But at the festival, Green Goblin shows up, decides he's going to ruin it, kills a bunch of guys. That's where the CGI shows up, where he throws a bomb and these guys turn to skeletons. It's super ridiculous.
Out am I?
He is attempting to bomb the board before they sell, which he succeeds. Impressive knowing that Willem Dafoe actually does a lot of the practical stuff in this Green Goblin suit, taking this role very seriously. Green Goblin flees and Spider-Man rescues MJ at the last second. MJ is going out with Harry, but she doesn't seem super into him. She seems to be kind of into that spider guy. Norman's bourbon of choice seems to be Maker's Mark. We see a huge bottle of it sitting on his desk or on his dresser next to a decanter that he uses to fill up a smaller glass later. But Willem Dafoe, amazing. The drug gives Norman a split personality in the movie, and watching Willem Dafoe play both these characters is so good. Despite how shitty Jameson can be, we see when his life is on the line and Peter is right there with Green Goblin standing, like holding on to him. He straight up lies about where he gets the pictures of Peter Parker, saying they come in the mail.
A Spider-Man!
I don't know who he is. His stuff comes in the mail.
You're lying!
I swear.
He don't even know. Peter, goes out, stops Green Goblin. Peter creepily, though, later goes downtown, runs into MJ on purpose. But luckily, he does so because she ends up in trouble and beats up the bad guys, and we get the iconic upside down kiss in the rain scene. Spider-Man goes into a burning building to save a lady, but it turns out totally not a lady. It's the Goblin again. There's a cool fight in the burning building because, it's on fire. It's really cool to watch them fight and the whole thing. And they leave. Norman shows up to their Thanksgiving saying work was murder, which of course, should be taken metaphorically in that situation. But we know it was literal because he probably caused that fire that, he said Spider-Man is so predictable. He knew Spider-Man would show up, try to save those people. Norman sees the cut that Spider-Man has on his arm, though. He realizes, what's going on, who he is, and then he, says a bunch of crap about a bunch of people to Harry and ruins Thanksgiving. Aunt May says her nightly prayers later, essentially that night it looks like, and she's attacked and hospitalized by the Green Goblin to let Peter know that he knows who he really is. Peter and MJ, while they're at the hospital, they have this real sweet heart-to-heart. Of course, Aunt May pretends to be asleep in the same room while they're talking. Harry comes in at the end of their whole conversation, and he doesn't seem happy to see them together. Of course, after everything that already had happened, he leaves and has a heart-to-heart with his dad, and then as a gift, because he's so proud of his son, he decides he's going to go out as a Green Goblin and kill Spider-Man so Mary can be with MJ. But he used her as bait to lure Peter out. Green Goblin makes Peter choose between saving a bunch of kids that seem to be on some nighttime field trip and Mary Jane. But he's Spider-Man, so he saves them both. Because, of course. In the process, though, we get a bunch of people from New York that decide to help him by throwing random trash at the Green Goblin, because the Green Goblin is a terrible guy, and if you mess with one New Yorker, you mess with all of us. Then we see Gobby and Peter up in this abandoned building. They end up with Spider-Man, gets a shit beat out of him by Green Goblin. I mean, he's just beating the living shit out of him. But then Goblin decides he's going to threaten MJ, and that pisses Spidey the hell off. Ain't dealing with it. So he he gets back up, fights him, and then Green Goblin decides he's going to try to deceive Spidey or run the glider through him. But Spider Sense kicks in, he jumps out of the way, and Norman gets railed right in the groin area, basically, right in the balls. Peter drops off Norman's body. Harry's there and thinks that he did it. Of course, he wants to make Spider-Man pay for thinking that Spider-Man killed his father. Finish the movie at Norman's funeral. MJ's near-death experience made her realize that she has feelings for Peter. She really loves him. But to protect her from the secret, and obviously Green Goblin found out fairly quickly, so he doesn't think that he'd be able to keep his secret for long. He wants to keep his loved ones safe, and he realizes he can't be with her. We finish with a bit of narration from Peter as we see Spider-Man swinging off. It's crazy how superhero films have come. I mean, this is going up on a Wednesday, the day after Loki comes out. Now, imagine the kind of just dissonance, I guess, between the 20 years that have come between this. I mean, it's a wonderful, colorful, campy ride from beginning to end with some motion thrown in for good measure. It was definitely a pleasure to revisit. So we're going to follow our villain, Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe, where he becomes a more helpful character in a smaller role in an animated film you might be fairly familiar with, Finding Nemo. Catch us next week with that whale of a time. And remember, some of us are just born geeky. You have a good one.